Hello and a very good day to Mr. Mahadi and all of my friends. So today we are going to present our task 2 or presentation for TSLB3103 Second Language Acquisition. Our dear lecturer is Mr. Mahadi bin Saran, and my group members that will be presenting with me today are Elively Ali Richard, Irdayana binti Muhammad Nasir, which is me, and also Vanessa Valeries binti Silis. Now I'm going to pass this presentation to Vanessa Valeries.
Thank you, Irdayana. So very briefly, I will explain the description or overview of the lesson plan. So we have chosen a lesson plan for Year 3 pupils with the theme of World of Knowledge. And the topic of the lesson is Where Were You Yesterday? And this is a speaking-focused lesson plan with the integrated skill reading. And the language or grammar focus is on past simple statements, which is was and weren't, and also positive and negative statements. And the content standard for speaking is use appropriate communication strategies. And for reading, which is read independently for information and enjoyment. So the learning standard is as seen on the screen. And the learning objectives is by the end of the lessons, pupils should be able to keep interaction going by using past simple questions, was or were, and statements was, wasn't, were, weren't, based on the worksheet given to talk about Atlantis in the past. And also, people should be able to create and present their own ending on what happened to Atlantis based on the last line of the text. So as we can see, the main material of this lesson is on the lost city of Atlantis. This is used to teach the topic, Where Were You Yesterday? And for further details of the lesson, we can refer to the lesson plan attached in the Google Classroom.
Thank you, Elively. So now I'm going to present the analysis of the lesson plan, which are the strengths. So the first one is the input is comprehensible and interesting. So this lesson plan which we have chose is for year 3 pupils, which means that it must not only be able to grab the attention of the students, but also help them to understand the context of the lesson easily. So we believe that this lesson plan successfully fulfill this requirement. To ease the process of language acquisition for young children, the materials used as an input should be interesting and relevant to cater their interest in language learning. So something that they are familiar with or things that they love to talk about. Okay, to make language acquisition easier, the materials used for input should be both interesting and relevant. This will help learners to acquire language naturally without conscious effort. So when learners are exposed to something interesting or interesting materials, it will boost their motivation to learn. According to Gong 2023, questions input hypothesis theory mentioned that to acquire language knowledge, it's necessary for them to have access to materials that are understandable and comprehensible. So that same goes to an input should be interesting to reduce or eliminate their sense of anxiety in language learning and make them think that the information is coded. Okay, so we want to make them think that language learning is easy. It's something that is possible and make the learning process look natural rather than thinking that they are learning in a formal context of language acquisition, which will make them feel more stressed up, cooped up in their classroom. This way, we want them to learn as if it's something that they are possible to learn, to make them acquire the language without them realizing it. So in the in the presentation stage, the teacher gives them the input by introducing the structure that they will be applying throughout the lesson. However, we want to stimulate the pupils' interest and make them forget that they are learning a language in a formal classroom. So the teacher makes them talk about their previous experience, which is Sukantara, something that is closely related to them, while including the input to create a stress-free context for them to learn. So when we are less likely to feel stressed and talk about something that we are interested in, something that we love, it will be easier for us to gain the input and talk about it effortlessly. That same goes for children. So, a stress free input will make the pupils want to explore more rather than stressing out to learn a language and boost their confidence in learning language and understanding the input. In the practice stage, the pupils read a short story called Atlantis, a city from the past, which is interesting to be used as the learning material that will capture the pupils' attention and interest in language learning. So things that are fantasy related will make them feel more attracted to the lesson because they are still young and they love to imagine things. Well, therefore, in ensuring that the pupils are able to acquire the language, the input context given to them must be interesting and relevant to the topic, as well as boosting up their confidence to learn a language, which also means that the teacher must be able to manage and provide a lesson where the inputs can easily be understood by the students and up in line with their latest interests. Now I'm going to pass this presentation to Vanessa.
Right, thank you, Irdayana. So I will be presenting the next point or the strength of this lesson plan, which is the input is clear for the students. As we analyze the lesson plan, we notice that there is an application of noticing hypothesis, which was introduced by Richard Smith. So, according to the noticing hypothesis, a learner's acquisition progress could not begin until the learner is aware of the linguistic features of the input. Smith went on to add that noticing is actually the first step in language building or language learning and not the end process. So, what it means here is that when we would teach the students in class, we must make the students aware of what they are learning and what they will gain at the end of the lesson so that they notice what they are learning and they will pay attention more on the things that on the things that they are told to focus on rather than just the whole context itself. So which is what happened in this lesson plan, where the instruction given by the teacher was very straight and clear for the students on what she expected the students to learn and to know by the end of the lesson, which is how to use the past tense was, were, weren't when questioning. There's also a sense of repetition in this lesson plan where the teacher constantly repeat to the students the instruction of how to use was, were, weren't in questioning, and also apply it on an activity where it focuses on this tense only in a conversation. So this repetition of instruction and activity will not only help the students to notice the learning, but they also will be much aware of how to use it in a daily conversation, and also the importance of knowing these rules when speaking with other people. So in their head, they will always remember it because there is a repetition here. So when there is a repetition, it will help them to memorize and remember that this is how to use it in a daily conversation, things like that. So in the presentation stage of the lesson plan, the teacher has provided the pupils with provided the people with a speaking structure that they are required to learn in order to complete the task. For example, students are introduced to the structure by teacher on the whiteboard. Thus, this allows students to notice and grasp the linguistic features that are necessary for the SLA process. Again, it shows how clear the teacher um, are telling and presenting to the students about what they are learning and what they must pay attention to. By putting it in front of the classroom, by presenting it in front of the classroom, it will help the students to notice what they are learning and be much aware and pay attention on the things on that they are supposed to learn instead of just the entire context. Okay. So beside that, the lessons also allow students to use the knowledge when asking questions in a real life context. The last activity, which is the production stage, it helps students to use this knowledge in a real life context. So not only the students will notice um, the learning process, but they will also be made aware of how to use this grammar rules in a real life conversation. Therefore, this is one of the strengths that that were presented in the lesson plan. So now I'm passing the next presentation to my fellow member, Vanessa.
Thank you, Elively. So another strength that we have noticed in the lesson plan is that it contains the element of collaboration between pupils. So this is an important element in today's education as it helps pupils to develop higher level thinking skills as they are required to work together to solve the problem at hand. So as explained in the overview of the lesson plan itself focuses on speaking skill, which means that students are bound to interact with one another. For example, this is seen in the practice and production stage where the students are required to work in pairs, as highlighted in the pictures provided. So this is also in line with Michael Long's interaction hypothesis that suggests that language acquisition occurs when learners engage in conversation with speakers who are more proficient than they are. So according to this hypothesis, interaction can provide learners with opportunities to receive feedback, negotiate meaning, and notice the gaps which can help them to refine their language skills. So therefore, we can see that this theory was applied as there is some sort of conversation happening when the pupils are carrying out the teaching and learning activity with their pair. Therefore, in order to realize this hypothesis, the teacher can also pair up with, the advanced students with the weaker students so that they can become the more knowledgeable other, as known as MKO. According to Vygotsky, the MKO refers to the people that have better understanding or higher level than others. So, therefore, they have a higher level of ability or understanding than the learner in terms of the task. So, these more knowledgeable others can actually promote interaction between one another and also guide the weaker pupils in the second language acquisition process. Hence, this is also in line with the interaction hypothesis that suggests that learners can acquire language successfully by engaging in meaningful interaction with others.
All right, thank you, Vanessa. So those are all the strengths that we have found from analyzing the lesson plan. Now we move on to the weaknesses that we found from the lesson plan. So the first weaknesses or the issues is the issue of students' motivation in learning. So this analysis we focus on the Christian affective filter hypothesis, where it stated that the language learning is highly affected by the learner's internal feelings and emotions. So if in this lesson plan, if we take a look at the production stage, the activity requires the pupils to create and write their own ending based on the story that they have just read. This allows the pupil to unleash their creativity and give them freedom to express themselves, thus encouraging a positive behavior toward the task at hand. So it is actually a very good activity. However, if we take into consideration of the age group of these students, which is year 3, writing activity might not be their favorite activity, especially when this lesson should focus on this on speaking skills. So when you give the students a writing activity, they might not enjoy it, which will causes them to demotivate in accomplishing their task, which will be a barrier in the language learning. So um, yeah, as stated, not all people will enjoy writing, especially year 3 students, which might demotivate them in accomplishing the task. This is what's stated in Crescent affective filter hypothesis, where students' internal negative attitudes and emotion can impede their ability to acquire second language. So when students are not interested in the activity or the lesson, they will not be able to fully participate in the activity, which will be a problem, which will be a barrier for them to actually acquire the language. So this will cause the students to not learn the language, and will actually be hard for the teacher to handle the class if the students are not interested with the lesson. So this are one of the issues that we managed to find from the lesson plan. Now I'm passing the presentation to my next group mate. Thank you.
Another weakness that we have noticed in this lesson is the lack of interaction in speaking activities. Why? Let me explain. Although this is a speaking focused lesson, ironically enough, we noticed that speaking was not the main focus. And this is because there are other skills integrated in the lesson, such as reading skill, as highlighted in blue in the practice stage, and also writing skill, as highlighted in yellow in the production stage. So, according to Long's interaction hypothesis, communication and natural interaction helps learners to acquire the language better. So, although we have stated before that collaboration is one of the many strengths in this lesson plan, we fear that the need of communication and interaction will not be enough for the students. So, why? This is because in the practice and production stage, there were reading and writing activities, and we fear that this may hinder the need of interaction among students as this is a speaking focused lesson. Moreover, this is a 1 hour lesson, which got us thinking, will the students be able to have enough time to fulfill all these different tasks at hand? Or will the students be too occupied with the reading and writing tasks that they don't have enough time to engage in meaningful interaction with one another? So, logically speaking, what is the point of a speaking lesson when speaking is not the main focus through and through? So, yeah, those are some of our concerns with the lesson. Overall, at the end of the day, the main skill of this lesson is speaking, which means interaction actually plays a significant role in language acquisition. So this may be hard for pupils to achieve when they have to juggle with a lot of other tasks at hand. And with that being said, I'm passing the presentation to Irdayana to present our revised lesson plan and explain our countermeasures to overcome these weaknesses in the lesson plan.
Now we are going to talk about the revised lesson plan that we think should be applied in the lesson. Now we're going to talk about from the perspective of the interactive hypothesis by Michael Long. According to 2019, mentioned that Long inferred that communication and natural interaction helps learners to acquire the language better. Therefore, one way to improve the lesson plan is by providing more activities in which the students can apply their knowledge that they have gained in a real life context. So it also means that it's important for the students to have an input that which is authentic so that they are able to apply what they have learned outside of the classroom. We can achieve this by conducting a natural interaction in the practice stage. For example, instead of just the students reading the questions, they could be divided into two groups, such as group A and group B. And then each group will be given different set of questions, and group A will be allowed to first walk around the classroom and ask questions from group B members for a given time, and then vice versa. This will not only help the students to acquire the language through interaction, but also strengthen their confidence in using the language. So the improvisation that we made is through the activity where at first in Appendix B, you can see here before, the pupils were only divided into pairs, and then they will likely just ask one another questions and just take it in real life context. It's quite possible that the pupils will just basically write the answers without talking to one another. So to ensure the pupils are really using the language and speaking and interacting with one another, the improvisation is by splitting the class into two and group them to group A and group B. So first, group A is required to walk around, right? But group B is required to sit down. Then group A will go around and ask questions to group B. In Appendix C, we can see that the difference in the worksheet is that they are required to write the names for each pupil that they have asked and also the answers. So the rationale of this activity is that Long stated that to improve the language acquisition, it is important to communicate with people who are better in the language. So when the pupils go around and communicate with other pupils, there's a higher chance for them to likely talk to their friends who is better in the language, which will help them to improve their language acquisition as they can also learn from one another. So it is possible for them to acquire the language better when they are grouped instead of pairs. So when they make mistakes, they can also help each other to improve in so many factors. Because it is true that children also learn better when they communicate with their peers to discuss something. Okay, that is all from my part. Now I'm going to pass this presentation to Elively.
Alright, thank you. So next, on the revised lesson plans or how we will improve our lesson plan is by applying the effective filter hypothesis by Stefan Krashen, which suggests that language learners might be distracted by emotional factors in language learning process, which will hinder them from fully being engaged in the learning process. So it is possible that the students will not be able to absorb what they should learn in class because their teachers uncongenial manners or classmates aggressive or competitive attitudes. So in this case, maybe because they are not interested in the activity, because it is in a speaking lesson. However, at the end product, they are asked to write it down and just present it in front of the class. So emotionally, the students might feel unmotivated, demotivated, and uninterested in the lesson, which will be a distraction in the language learning process. So what the teacher can do here is, instead of just giving them writing lessons, the teacher can improvise it by changing it. Instead of writing, it can focus more on the speaking skills. Thus, we suggest to revise the activity by having a pupil act out the ending with their friends instead of writing it. In this case, the teacher can also provide pupils with costumes and props to add their performance. This way, we believe that it will encourage the students better, and the students will be more motivated to learn, because year 3 students are active students. They want to do fun activities. They don't like sitting down and writing, and just writing pen and pencil activity. So when we give them a role play activity, they can have a discussion with each other. There's a communicative approach happening, and the students are able to enjoy the lesson better, and thus help them to acquire the language learning process. And as we can see that this is the the comparison between the before and after lesson plan. The first one, as you can see, it focuses more on writing skills, and the students is presenting it. And for the improvised one, the pupils are going to are going to discuss in groups and act out the ending that they have come up with. So not only that, it will help to motivate the students better, this will also fulfill the task better, because it is a speaking skills, right? So this when we improvise it, it focuses more on the speaking skills instead of writing. Therefore, it will also make this lesson plan a much better lesson plan. Okay, so that is the revised lesson plans on the production skill that we have revised. Okay, so this is another example of how we will revise it. The first one is the before, where they have to create their own ending, and it started with the sentence: "The people of Atlantis were happy, but not for long." See, the lack of colors might also be something that demotivate the students. And then the next one is, after we have improved the lesson plan, the application of costumes and props will help the students to be more motivated when learning the when during the lesson. So yeah, that's it for the revised lesson plans on the effective filter hypothesis. I'll pass this to my next group member, which is not Irdayana.
Thank you for staying tuned till the end. And these are the resources that we have used throughout our presentation. That is all from us. Thank you.